I'm comfortably caught up in the way of everyone.
I'm actually looking at the screen, not your
No, he likes St. Mary behind her.
Okay.
You're talking to Judge.
Richard, focus.
I have all questions about
The new congregation.
I'm pretty good at prompting chat. Do you have a question for you? Do you have problems for us? Oh.
She throws it in the
I think you're onto something.
I need to take a 10-minute break.
Buddha and I go way back, so it's all good.
The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Alright. So I'm going to preface this by saying I was asked to give this talk 48 hours ago. So we are going to have a conversation rather than me giving you a talk in a sense. And I've changed. Oh, sorry. Were you going to do an introduction?
No, go ahead.
I was just going to cry.
You're going to cry?
No, I have a slider if you guys want to ask
Okay.
anonymous questions about the talk. Just pass it around. You go. This guy's just
Sorry to. No, listen. So I know that originally I think your topic was around boundaries in dating or something similar to that. But I've changed it a little bit, and what I thought we could do is actually take a journey before we get to boundaries in dating. And I've called our conversation. I'm calling it a conversation, not a talk. I've called our conversation "Honoring God and Protecting Love." And it's going to seem like I'm going in a bit of a roundabout way to get to the topic that you had all wanted to talk about, which is boundaries, particularly in intimate relationships. But I think it's important for us to kind of go back to the beginning and understand some foundational things first before we get into the core of what it is that we want to discuss. So I want to start by talking about something some of you might know about. Or maybe something that some of you don't know about. And so forgive me if you know all about this. And if you don't, I think you'll find this really interesting. There's a couple of experiments that I find really, really interesting. I love research, I love experiments, I love science. I'm very interested in working out why things happen and how they happen. And in the 1940s, there were some children that were separated from their parents because of the bombings in London. And at the time, or up until that time, people held a really firm belief that children love their parents because they give them food and shelter, they look after them, and that's the reason that they attach to their parents. But there was this psychologist by the name of John Bowlby, who actually thought this doesn't quite make sense. It seems that children need more than food and sustenance and warmth for their survival and for their needs. And what he did was he actually went to work with those children that were separated from their parents and that were placed in hospitals. And he noticed that even though they were getting all the food that they wanted, they were warm, they were safe, they weren't thriving, they weren't growing, they weren't achieving their potential in terms of milestones, medical milestones and cognitive milestones. Around the same time, there was another guy doing a different experiment. His name was Harold Harwood, and he carried out this experiment with monkeys. He got these baby monkeys, put them in an enclosure, and put two statues in this enclosure. One statue, which is the one that you can see in the picture, is the one on the right, or my right, your left. That statue was just a mesh steel statue, and it had feeding apparatus, so that the baby monkeys could go to this statue and get the food that they wanted. The other statue that he had, or the other kind of figure that he had, didn't have any feeding apparatus, but it just had like a fur cover on it. But there was no way that the monkeys could use it to get any food. And he noticed something really, really interesting. If you look really closely at this picture, you'll see that the baby monkey is actually sitting at the feet of the one that's covered by fur. Even though that statue doesn't have anything to provide it other than warmth and a sense of connection to another being. He wanted the statues to mimic roughly the size of a mother monkey. And then he took it a step further. So after he found that these baby monkeys would spend their entire day kind of perched like this at the feet of this statue covered in wool, he took them to different areas of this lab that he set up. And in one area, he set up like toys and games and all sorts of things that would be interesting for a monkey, but there was a new environment. And when he put the monkeys in there, he noticed that they would just go and they would sit in the corner and that they wouldn't explore. They were actually terrified of the environment. And even when he put the statue that had the feeding apparatus, the one that was just the metal statue, they would do the same thing. They'd go to it when they were hungry, but then they'd go and sit back in the corner. They wouldn't do anything. But then when he put the statue that was covered in fur, something really interesting started to happen. They started to venture out just a little bit, play a little bit, and come back to that statue, sit by it for a while, and then venture out a little bit more until eventually they started to play in their environment and explore it. And then he decided, to take it a step further. And he decided to actually see what happens if he was to actually scare or startle these monkeys. And so when he did that, they would go instantaneously to this fur-covered statue, even though it had nothing for them. It had no food, it had no comfort. This is very different to like the Freudian way of thinking, because Freud and a lot of his peers believed that we actually got comfort from that feeling sensation, from a physical component of who we are. So then, John Balby was doing this, Harold Carlo was doing that, and comes along this woman by the name of Mary Ainsworth, who actually decided to look at what happens in children's relationship to their parents in terms of when they actually separate from their parents for a particular period of time. What happens in the way that they interact with other people and how they deal with other people. So she set up a different experiment, and it's called the stranger experiment. And this might all sound very irrelevant to what we're talking about, but I promise you it's connected. She set up this different experiment where she took kids, young kids under the age of 2 and their parent, usually their mum, and she'd put them in a room and she'd ask them to play for a while, and at some point in time she'd ask the mum to go and to leave the child with a stranger. And just noticed how that child interacted with the stranger and how they responded to the mum when she came back. Those of them who had healthy relationships, what we now call secure attachments, were really upset when the mum left, but when she came back, they went to her for comfort and they felt better straight away. The ones that had different levels of insecure attachment, they actually started to look like either they didn't care that the mum left, they ignored the stranger, they didn't go to that stranger for comfort, they just continued doing whatever they were doing, indifferent to whether the mum left or not. And this is what we now know, what's typically called avoidant attachment. And the ones that were also experiencing a level of insecure attachment had something called, they had anxious attachment. They would actually get so distressed when the parent left, and no matter what the parent did when they came back, there was nothing they could do to comfort them. So these people in these 3 different kind of experiments in 3 different areas discovered something really interesting. They discovered that from the moment that we're born, we're actually hardwired for connection. We're not necessarily always looking for food or for shelter. What we actually also need is a human emotional connection. There's one final experiment I want to tell you about, and then I'll stop telling you experiments, I promise, because I could talk about experiments all day. It's actually called the forbidden experiment. I don't think you'll find any literature about it anymore. It used to be written about, there were a few articles about it up until maybe 10 years ago, and all evidence of it's been taken away. It's really interesting. I think there's some stuff about it in some dark web somewhere. I have read articles about it, I do have it. It's called a forbidden experiment because of what happened. It was in America, and again, it was sometime in the 1940s, and there were these babies that were orphaned that they decided to take and put into an institution. And in that institution, again, they had this belief that kids just needed to be fed and clothed, they didn't need anything else. And so they decided to just feed them and clothe them, take care of them, but not give them any affection or attention because that's a way of spoiling a child. And what happened was, within a couple of months, they had to abandon the experiment. Do you have any idea why?
Stress.
What?
Harming themselves?
Hmm?
Are they harming themselves?
They were babies,
Death.
like they're under 2. Death, half the babies died. And by the end, by another few months, there were 40 of them. A few months later, the rest of them died.
They die from stress?
They died from what we now know is called failure to thrive syndrome. Failure to thrive syndrome happens when a person's nervous system is so dysregulated that their cortisol levels remain high and dysregulated at all times, that they're unable to grow, they're unable to deal with stress. Their nervous system was destroyed. And they actually died. So as soon as they got a cold, their body couldn't fight it, and they would die. And one by one, they simply died. The final 2 were found in a hardcore prison in America and killed. And that was the entire 40 babies. It's pretty brutal. But this is what we know. What we know is from the time that we're born, we're actually hardwired for connection. We have this thing in us that gravitates and wants other people in our life. And the things that happen to us in our childhood influence how we then see ourselves and how we see other people. A child that grows up in an environment where their primary caregiver, usually their mum, sometimes their dad, sometimes their grandparent, whatever, is someone that's responsive to their needs, that actually takes care of them, that supports them. They grow up believing that others in the world are capable of doing that. So they have 2 core beliefs. You probably can't see them very often here. But their core beliefs are, I'm okay and everyone else is okay. And what Bellamy, Ainsworth and others found out is those core beliefs about ourselves and our others that we form in our childhood stay with us for the rest of our life. Unless we have some other attachments later in life that heal those. We'll come back to that later. If we have an experience in childhood where we have insecure attachment, we grow up either believing one of 2 things. Either I'm not worthy of being loved, or other people are incapable of loving me. And when we believe that I'm not worthy of being loved, we grow up to be someone that maybe is anxious, that's always asking someone, do you love me? Do you care about me? Are we still in a relationship? Are we okay? Is everything all right? Are we still together? What's going on? Anxious, wanting that reassurance that everything in a relationship is okay. The one that believes that others are incapable of loving me grows up to be that person of, I don't need anyone. I'm cool on my own. I put up a wall. I'm independent. I don't need anyone in my life. I don't need a relationship. I don't need anything there. But irrespective of whether on the outside we're anxious or we're avoided, what we know is in the core of our being, we're actually in need, hardwired for connection. So one of the things that happens across our lifetime is that we start to be conditioned about what that connection looks like. And we start to be conditioned about it from a really, really young age. We start to actually look for ways of meeting that need. And it becomes those attachment styles and those ways of interacting with others and our belief about ourselves and our belief about other people is most clearly evident in romantic relationships. So I want us to watch this together because I think it's a really fun, cool example of how from a very, very young age we develop ideas about what it is to be in relationship with others. Hopefully it works, right? In this film. Oh, hold on.
You've got a boyfriend? Yeah. You've got more than one? Yeah. Okay, how many boys have you got? 25. Oh! That's quite a bit, okay. Hi there, I'm Mr. Silver, and I'm teaming up with my mates to invite you to be my Valentine. Together we can pop champagne, enjoy cocktails, chocolate. Now to make sure our extraordinary night is perfect, I've brought together a team of people who can help me think outside the box. You see, none of you have been on date. Yeah, but I know a lot of good advice for one because I'm on camera. I like your style. Right, so can someone tell me what happens at the date? You take the girl somewhere nice, like somewhere she likes, like a girl concert. Okay. Pay for everything and agree with everything she says. You know about the girl. If I'm trying to impress my date? Can I be a bad boy persona or a good guy persona? Bad. Yeah? Because if you're good, then you might have to wear glasses, suspenders, and ugly trousers, and your watch will be a babyish one, and then your date will probably slap you because you like someone bad. Okay, so now I'm writing all this information down. I don't know what to do with my date. Good, by far. Good. Yeah, because you want her to like you in order to like you might want to propose to her someday. That's true. Yeah. You're a romantic partner. I'm out with you today. What kind of food should I eat? Don't eat beans. Yeah, when you get beans. Why beans? Because you're fast. If I go on my date, should I dance? Okay, so hi, come to my date. Shall we dance? Yeah? Don't do that, don't. And then swing her around. Right, so that's a romantic Cosman. Yeah. Yeah, and then you can kiss her. Are you sure this is going to work? Yes, but I bet you. If I like someone, how will I tell them on my first date? You will have to walk like this. What, like this? Yes, next one. Just pass that. Oh, sorry, can we practice this? That is ingenious. You could do it in the song. I really like you. I really want to be your friend. I really like you. No. I really like you. I want to be a date. Me together. This is fake. That's close. If you could be on Valentine's Day with anyone in the world, who would it be? Oliver's. Oliver's? Good answer. Ariana Grande. James Bond. James Bond. Would any of you guys like to be my Valentine? Yeah, because you're famous. Give me my Valentine. Give me my Valentine. Yes. Okay. My mum would. Well, I've got just one more question. Would you be my Valentine? I mean, I've got a pretty good idea of what makes an absolutely romantic dinner for two, including drinks, dinner, and a crisscross dance. So
The crisscross dance is actually one of my favorites. Did you do that when you...
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. That's why you have grace.
Can you, I'm thinking
I was so curious watching her. She's like, she wouldn't.
But what's really, really interesting about this is we actually develop ideas about romantic relationships and intimacy from a really, really young age.
Disney?
Disney? Yeah.
parents definitely.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we've inherited from Disney is this idea that people should be able to read other people's minds and just make their needs, but that's a whole other topic.
It's toxic, right? It's toxic.
It's real messed up.
It's real toxic. No, and the dancing, to my Disney needs to be a Disney princess.
Yeah. And the world tells us a lot of things about what makes a good relationship, right? Social conditioning is really interesting. It changes the neural pathways in our brain. So much so that all you need to do is hear a siren outside and you know without seeing the car that is the vehicle that is coming from, whether it's an ambulance or a fire truck or a police, you know intuitively, right? You know because you're so attuned to sounds and stimuli in our environment. And social conditioning about relationship happens from the time almost that we're born. We start to see relationships in our own home environment, we see it in movies, we see it in churches, we see it in communities, we see it in schools, we see it everywhere. So then what happens when we have this inherent desire for attachment that we're born with, that's been implanted in us from the time that we were created? We have social conditioning that tells us that relationships should look and be a particular way, and there is a way of doing things. And when we couple that with a misguided sense of self-worth, we actually get something like a porcupine hugging a cactus. We actually end up with a lot of people who are hurting in some way and maybe don't quite yet have an idea of where this need for a relationship comes from, and using relationships to actually meet needs that relationships are not designed to meet. And we have situations like this where it can sometimes feel like two people who are trying to come close to each other are actually causing each other harm simultaneously. And so what's the solution? How do we actually start to think about what does this picture of honouring God and protecting love look like? So I'm sorry if, again, you've been to something I've shared before and you've heard this example. If you have, please go and learn it further. But I want you to imagine for a minute that as we're sitting here, someone barges in from the back door of the church, goes into the altar, finds that white cloth that you have wrapped the utensils of communion with, so the chalice and the plate, brings it out here, opens it up, throws it on the floor, and starts stomping all over it. By the expression on some of your faces, I can see that you're horrified. Why are you horrified? Why does that disturb you in some way?
Someone came to church voluntarily.
Huh? Sorry?
Someone came to church voluntarily. I'm very happy.
Someone came to church voluntarily.
Silver lining, Richard, such a positive man.
I love the positivity.
Positivity.
Wow.
Not your favourite tonight.
Seriously, why does that disturb you? Why does that image disturb you? Let's just pause for a moment. Of course it's disturbing, but why is it
The
disturbing?
stress on the person for him to do something like that.
Sorry?
What is he going through for him to do something like that? That would be my... What happened?
Okay. Are you telling me that your first impulse, the first thought that you have is what happened to this person?
Why is he doing that?
No,
It's
it's the frustration is that I know, I
So-
feel like someone's defiled something I know to be holy.
Guys, the items hold, I think, the items hold Christ. So the fact that he's voluntarily going and stomping on them, you're more frustrated that he's stepping on something as holy as that.
Well, okay, so hold on. Let's backtrack a little bit. So your frustration is coming from the fact that he's stomping on something that you regard as holy.
Yeah.
And you said something really interesting. You regard it as holy because of what it holds.
Yeah, because I know where you're going.
Hmm?
Yeah, because I see where you're going with it.
Yeah, because you see where I'm going.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad that you see where I'm going. Because you hold it holy because of what it holds, right? It holds the body and blood of Christ. But the thing is, how long does it hold the body and blood of Christ? By the way, there are churches that have that chalice and that plate, whatever, and the spoon and so on, made of aluminium. There are churches that have it made of fine gold. There are churches that have it made of silver. It has nothing to do with the material, right, that it's made from. If I said to you that someone came and stomped on a paper plate and a paper cup, you wouldn't blink. So what? There is something about the fact that these utensils hold the body and the blood of Christ that make them valuable, precious, sanctified, holy. My question for you, though, is how long do they hold the body and the blood of Christ?
So half an hour.
Minutes, right? Minutes on any given liturgy. The thing is, what's really interesting to me, sorry, I've lost things. What's really interesting to me is how deacons, particularly young deacons, and I love watching this, how young deacons panic and handle these utensils the first time that they're asked to handle. Those of you who are deacons, you've probably seen this, when you you give a deacon, even the spoon, and you tell them to, and they're like, they're petrified of dropping this thing. And even if you notice, deacons that have been deacons for a long time, taking particular care and caution, as if they were treating something that was made of fine paper gold or something. There is a delicacy and there's a sensitivity to the way that these utensils are even handled. Let's learn how much they're respected. The bizarre thing for me is, I don't have to convince any of you that they're holy, that they're valuable, that they should be treated that way. We have no doubts about that. No one, in fact, when I use this example even with non-Christians, like with people in meetings, whatever, where there's a mix of people, no one ever says, oh no, hold on, they're just a plate and a cup, we don't care. Even atheists don't do that. I wonder what it would be like, though, if we viewed ourselves as more precious than that plate and that cup. If we actually believed what we say we believe, and that is, we are not a vessel for the body and blood of Christ for mere moments. We are the living temple of Himself, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because if I said to you, we're going to go get that plate and that cup and we're going to eat pizza and drink Coke out of it, you'd probably throw me out of the church, right? The value of something determines what goes into it and what comes out of it. And so if I value myself more than that plate and that cup, then everything that comes out of me and everything that comes into me will be evaluated by that value. In fact, I would take it a step further. I would say that every decision that we make in our life is determined by how much we value ourselves, by what we actually believe our inner self-worth is. Now, if how I value myself determines what I allow into me, how I allow others to treat me, and what comes out of me, what would it be like to start to see other people as also more valuable in that plate and that cup? How would you then treat these other people that are all around you? So much more so, how would you treat someone that you had some kind of emotional attachment to? So before we can talk about boundaries and relationships, we need to actually think about how we see ourselves and the other person in any relationship, particularly in romantic relationships. This isn't about men and women or roles or any of that. It's actually just about what we believe to be our own self-worth and the worth of others. Because as the body of Christ, if we actually see each other as more valuable as that plate and that cup, we would be just as outraged if someone was hurting in some way as we would if someone came in and stomped on that plate and that cup. It should elicit the same response for us. And we would actually be really thinking about how we treated other people, whether we actually would treat the person that we are in a relationship with, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship or whatever, the boundaries we put around that relationship, whether we're genuinely treating them in the way that deacons handle that plate and that cup. And I think if we start to think about things in that way, we might actually pause and reconsider what it is that we think of as boundaries, what we can and can't do, what we should and shouldn't do, what's allowable, what's not allowable, become really, really different questions. And another thing that becomes a really different question is this idea of boundaries and limits. Because if I said to you we were going to go eat pizza and drink Coke from that plate and that cup, you would be like, you're crazy. There are limits and there are boundaries and there's particular ways of dealing with those utensils. When we start to think about boundaries as an expression of self-worth, and the idea that I place boundaries in my relationships not as a way of keeping people out, but as a way of honouring God in me and honouring God in that person, we start to see them really differently. The definition of a boundary is a property line that defines where you end and someone else begins. It keeps the good in and the bad out. One of the famous quotes from that famous book, Boundaries in Relationship by Cloud and Townsend. Boundaries are the invisible walls that protect a relationship from outside forces that could damage its integrity. John and Julie Gottman, have a research lab that's been running for over 30 years. And they look at different things in relationships. So one of the most interesting things that they look at in relationships is the patterns and the things that actually help relationships survive. And it's not that people in relationships that survive don't fight or that they don't argue. It's actually something really, really different. They found that one of the most telling signs is where couples are able to go from really difficult conversations, from arguments, from disagreements, to humorous, light-hearted conversations, where couples can make that transition really easily, where they see goodness in each other, even in the times that things are difficult. Where they can actually go, yes, we're arguing about this is a topic, this is a problem, we're putting a boundary around it, and we want to talk about it in a particular way, we're going to be respectful and kind and treat each other well, even in the disagreement, and we can also be light-hearted about where we're at in our relationship. In a God-honouring relationship, boundaries reflect a deep respect for the other person made in the image of God, not as an object to be used. So before we can think about what can I do, what can't I do, what's allowable, what's not allowable, the question before that is, am I actually treating this person as someone made in the image of God, the bearer of Christ himself, not as something that I want to get something from, which is very different to the social conditioning. Because if we take a step back for a minute to social conditioning, even if you think about how media talks about sexual relationships, for example, it's always from a selfish perspective. It's always about getting something from the other person. It is not, we are not conditioned to think about these things as a way of giving, as a way of honouring God in another person. And so if we have boundaries and we have self-worth and we understand that we need attachment relationships, we need to think about how then we protect love. At the moment, I'm participating in this beautiful course, subject, about St. Macarius' writings, and it's called Wounded by Love. Oh, the Wound of Love. Wounded by Love is the Wound of Love. And it talks about how God, how the wound of love is about God coming into our wounds of love and healing them through his own wounds of love. And it's interesting to think about protecting love in this way as well, that yes, we may not have had the most ideal attachment relationships in childhood, we may not see ourselves in a particular way, but actually a healing love can help us move that and transition how we see ourselves and our sense of self-worth, and then ultimately how we relate to other people. So St. John Chrysostom says, purity is not simply avoiding sin, but possessing a heart that is full of love for God. If every relationship that we're in has God in the center, then we want to be thinking about how we are actually conveying that heart that's full of love for God. Seeing the other as the plate and the cup, really recognizing that this other person that we're dealing with is of greater value than that chalice and that plate. If this church was burning down right now, God forbid, I don't think a firefighter would come in here, tell us all, oh no, you can just all wait, we've got to go in there and get the chalice and the cup from here. They'd be getting each and every one of us out instead. Love in its purest form is a reflection of God's nature, self-giving, sacrificial and life-giving. In relationships, honouring God is the key to protecting love from becoming distorted by selfishness, lust, and worldly pleasures. And I leave you with this final quote, one of my favourite quotes from C.S. Lewis. He says, "Love is not an affectionate feeling, but a steady wish for the loved person's ultimate good as far as it can be obtained." I think we don't need rules. We don't need to be told what's yes and what's no. I think what we need is we need to get to a place where we see the other person in such a loving way that we want their ultimate good. We want them to become in greater unity with God and to see God in them far more than we had previously. No problem. That's it from me. And all of trees. Questions?
Any questions? Are there live questions?
Yeah, there are.
Okay, there are live questions.
Okay, we have a question. Can you like read them? Yeah, no, read them and say if we're gonna ask them.
What do you feel like is the biggest barrier? What's the biggest interior barrier that you find
Like that.
within ourselves that have like prevented us from healthy attachment or a healthy perspective of love? Or actually of all those concepts, like a healthy perspective of love, understanding boundaries, like what's your interior barrier?
Do you get what I mean?
That's, essentially in our control.
So the question is, what's the interior barrier?
Yeah, interior barrier that prevents us from
That prevents us
from a healthy perspective.
of ourselves or others.
Both.
I don't know that there's one. I think we have
Honourable mentions. Honourable mentions. Top 5.
Honourable mentions of 100. Look, I think it's complicated, right? I think we may experience what we call in the world of psychotherapy, counselling, psychology, attachment traumas at various stages, right? So imagine, for example, a teenager who grows up in a really healthy, loving, happy home and has a best friend that they've had since she was in kindergarten, right? And she gets to 14, 15, and this best friend that she's had since kindergarten totally betrays her.
She said I can stay.
Because that particular event happened at a particular developmental stage where friendships are so critical and so important, that could actually impact her ability to trust others and her sense of safe, secure attachment for many, many years to come, unless it's going. So it's not always that we have bad romantic relationships or that we have difficult parents or that we have whatever that lead us to a situation where maybe we see ourselves in a particular way or see others in a particular way. Sometimes it can be something as simple, even though that's not simple, but it can be something like that. And sometimes it's a self-protection, right? Sometimes it's like, been there, been hurt in that way, don't want to be hurt in that way again. Anything that remotely resembles anything like that, I'm going to run in that direction. Or it could be that I don't believe that I'm worthy of I'm not worthy of anyone like me. I don't believe that there is anything in me that is lovable. And so when someone tries to come along and say, hold on, there is, it's like, no, that is, I've held on to this belief for so long that I reject any possibility of hearing from someone else. So I don't know that there's one thing. I think we all have very unique wounds and we all have very unique life experiences. But what we know for a fact is that the only way that we heal from attachment traumas and this stuff is through secure and healthy relationships. And I've got news for us. No one has secure attachment.
Yeah.
Because no one was raised. I just want to...
We talk after.
Because none of us were raised by perfect parents. Perfectly secure attachment means we had parents that responded to our needs in a timely manner, consistently, appropriately at all times. None of us had that, surprise, surprise. The only secure, perfectly secure attachment that we can have is with the only perfect parent that there is. It's with God. And it's actually in that relationship, if we want to look at secure attachment to God, that we have all the conditions of secure attachment. So I don't want to get into another talk, but there is this, I can't resist. There is this beautiful analogy, right? And you would have seen this if you've ever gone to a playground, right? And if you've gone to a playground, you would have seen, you might have seen this scene where do I have to go? Do I have time? By the way, you can tell me to stop talking because I give 3-hour lectures, but it's important to tell me to stop talking.
No, keep talking.
It's this really cool scene anyway, and it's. If you see let's go with a mum and a son, it's easier. So a mum takes her son to a playground for the first time. And they go to the playground, her son is kind of attached to her leg and he doesn't want to go anywhere. She says, I'm going to go on, just have a look at the slide. Just have a look and come back. You don't have to go, you don't have to climb, just go have a look. So he takes a couple of steps forward, turns around to check that she's there, and might go towards the slide and comes right back. And then the next time he goes out, takes a couple more steps and might go up a couple of steps. And does this, what's called a circle of security, goes out and comes back to make sure that she's okay. Until eventually, this kid just bolts. They get into a playground, he's off, he's on the slides, monkey bars, whatever. And so she has to find a playground that has a fence because this kid can't control. You know what's really interesting is, that is what a healthy attachment looks like in children. It's a healthy attachment in therapy. It's a healthy attachment in marriage. And it's also what God did with us in a healthy relationship. He's how. When this kid goes out, he wants two things. Well, he wants a few things. He wants her to watch over him, to delight in his successes. So when he actually climbs those steps, she goes, wow, fantastic, well done, I'm so proud of you. He wants her to welcome him back when he's hurting. So when he hurts his knee, he wants to be able to run back to her and her to go, oh, you're okay, it's fine, give it a kiss, keep playing. Because that circle empowers him to explore more, to do more. And in a healthy marital relationship, we want a relationship that works as that, what we call that safe haven and that secure place. It's that place that we can go to the other person and say, hey, you know what, I'm really struggling with this, I don't know how to think through this. What we don't want is the other person to go, yeah, of course you don't, you never know how to solve these things. Let me tell you how to fix it. You're just stupid. We want someone to actually help us organize our thoughts and our feelings We also don't want to be in a relationship with someone that we're competing with, where our successes become something that are threatening to them. We want to be in a relationship with someone that's going to celebrate our successes and feel like when we succeed, they succeed, and we succeed together. We want the same thing in infancy as we want in adulthood. And what's interesting, and why I say God is the only secure attachment, is that's what God did right at the beginning. If you think about his relationship with Adam, right at the beginning, what does he say? He says, I created you, here you are, here's the garden, tend to it, look after it, go as you like, come back, ask questions, have conversations, and I can imagine the circle of security happening time and time and time again. And that kind of love, that kind of relationship is an empowering one. So when he does that, what's Adam's first thing before the fall when he gets Eve? It's an empowering love. It's a love that allows him to love Eve and to cleave to her. It's not a love that says, oh, you're mine, you go nowhere else. It's not that helicopter parent that says, you can't do anything. It's an empowering love. And so if we return to that empowering love, if we internally go back to that secure attachment, we can then become that safe haven and secure base for someone else and then form those healthy relationships.
So like having a life outside of the relationship,
Sorry?
like I find with some couples they get very attached, they don't have a life outside relationship.
Yeah.
So I tell a lot of people like you need to have your own life outside the relationship
Yes.
and then come together.
Yes,
to have-
absolutely.
yeah.
And that's exactly, again, that's a model of a healthy relationship. It's that a relationship is that safe haven and secure base. It's that thing I come to. I do what I need to do and I come back to this safe place. It's not the place that I stay. Adam was not locked into a particular circle with God and he was like, you can't do anything else. He was actually given freedom to explore. In fact, he was given freedom to love another in being provided with Eve. Right? It's not like you love me and no one else. It's no, you love me and that allows you to love others.
We have a question.
Yeah, sorry.
On the live.
I promise I won't take it.
No, it's fine. What do you do when you say sorry several times, but the other person will not forgive you? I made a mistake, but I'm not forgiven, and that is difficult.
It's tough. I would, look, it's very hard to answer this without context because, like, I made a mistake could mean a gazillion things, right? I made a mistake, I spilled some milk, I made a mistake, I cheated on someone. That's like worlds apart, whatever you like.
I can't forgive the milk. It's the milk.
The part that's wrong.
I can't.
Like,
I'm already.
We're
Cheating is fine. Don't spill milk. It's the milk. Cheating is fine. It's the milk that I'm worried about.
Wow. That's a broad spectrum. Look, I don't know. I don't have an answer to this. I guess there is one thing that I can say to this without knowing the context and without knowing what it is we're talking about. That we often want to love people and show our love for people in the way that we want to receive love, not in the way that they want to receive love. So for someone, an apology might be all that they need. They might just need someone to go, I'm really sorry, Martina, I stuffed up, I haven't called, I haven't asked about you, and you're comfortable with where I'm not problem, right? But for someone else, it might be, yes, I appreciate that you said sorry, but there is this thing that's broken that we need to fix. They're saying the sorry is, yes, it's appreciated that there's something else. So maybe it's possible that it's not so much that the person is not forgiving, but maybe there's a second step. There is another, and that is when we're hurt by others, we experience a certain type of loss. And sometimes the intention to forgive doesn't necessarily mean that we can forgive in the moment. Forgiveness is a bit of a journey. And so sometimes when we demand that someone says, yes, I forgive you, and they're not there yet, maybe they're being honest and saying, look, I'm still working through this, I'm not able to get to that place yet. I want to forgive you, I want to get past this thing, but I need to deal with the hurt that I've experienced as a result of this situation. But very hard to answer without context. I could be completely
It's the milk, bro. Keep him to the curb.
No, we're not done, but how do I end it? Oh,
Is there another question?
there is on this.